Okay, well, I'm here. Let's see here. Delete that one. Let's see if anybody makes it over to this one. I'm telling you, I'm messing things up, aren't I? I tried to get everything set up to do my live, and it just didn't work with me. So we'll see if anybody joins me. If not, that's okay. I will read anyways, and maybe somebody will pop on. I probably confused everybody by trying to set it up to do this, and it set it up for tomorrow instead of today, which was stupid. My cider's not as warm as it was. All right, let's see. Moving on to chapter 3. I'm just going to keep reading and see if anybody shows up. And then I'll see if I can get things situated over on my YouTube channel. It's just thinking. Kind of makes me wonder if maybe I've lost some of my internet a little bit here. Let me fix this. There we go. All right, we'll see if anybody joins me. If not, it's okay. All right, chapter 3. Hello, Denise. I'm glad you made it over. I messed things up, but I got it figured out, so I'm here now. So chapter 3, fall of the year. Pa and Laura stacked the last load of slough hay on a hot September afternoon. Pa intended to mow another patch next day, but in the morning rain was falling. For 3 days and nights the rain fell steadily, slow, weepy rain running down the window panes and pattering on the roof. Well, we must expect it, Ma said. It's the, oh my gosh, here's a word I can't even say. It's the equinoctial storm. like this, it's probably like a fall equinox or something. Yes, Pa agreed, but uneasily. There's a weather change, all right. A feather. I shouldn't have even done this. I should have stopped at 2 channels. Let's try this again. There's a weather change, all right, Pa said. A fellow can feel it in his bones. The next morning the shanty was cold. The window panes were almost covered with frost, and all outdoors was white. My goodness, Ma said, shivering, while she laid kindling in the stove. And this is only the first day of October. Laura put on her shoes and a shawl, and she went to the well for water. The air bit at her cheeks and scorched the inside of her nose with cold. The sky was coldly blue, and the whole world was white. Every blade of grass was furry with frost. The path was frosted. The boards of the well were streaked with thick frost, and frost had crept up the walls of the shanty along the narrow battens that held the black tar paper on. Then the sun peeped over the edge of the prairie, and the whole world glittered. Every tiniest thing glittered rosy towards the sun and pale blue towards the sky, and all along every blade of grass ran rainbow sparkles. We get that here in Iowa. We get the frost, huh, Denise? We get it when Jack Frost looks like he's just come blown across everything, and everything is all spiky and glittery. I love that when that happens. Laura loved the beautiful world. She knew that the bitter frost had killed the hay and the garden. The tangled tomato vines with their red and green tomatoes, and the pumpkin vines holding their broad leaves over the green young pumpkins, were all glittering bright in frost over the broken, frosty sod. The sod's corn stalks and long leaves were white. The frost had killed them. It would leave every living green thing dead, but the frost was beautiful. At breakfast, Pa said, "There will be no more haying, so we'll get in on our harvest. We can't get much from a first year on sod ground, but the sods will rot this winter. We'll do better next year." The plowed ground was tumbled slabs of earth, still held together by the grass roots. From underneath these sods, Pa dug small potatoes, and Laura and Carrie put them into tin pails. Laura hated the dry, dusty feeling of the earth on her fingers. It sent shivers up her backbone, but that couldn't be helped. Someone must pick up the potatoes. She and Carrie trudged back and forth with their pails till they had filled 5 sacks full of potatoes. That was all the potatoes there were. "A lot of digging for a few potatoes," said Pa, "but 5 bushels are better than none, and we can piece out with the beans." He pulled the dead bean vines and stacked them to dry. The sun was high now, all the frost was gone, and the wind was blowing cool over the brownish and purple and fawn-colored prairie. Ma and Laura picked the tomatoes. The vines were wilted down, soft and blackening, so they picked even the smallest green tomatoes. There were enough ripe tomatoes to make almost a gallon of preserves. "What are you going to do with the green ones?" Laura asked, and Ma answered, "Wait and see." She washed them carefully without peeling them. She sliced them and cooked them with salt and pepper, vinegar, and spices. That's almost 2 quarts of green tomato pickle. Even if it's only our first garden on the sod and nothing could grow well, these pickles will be a treat with baked beans this winter, Ma gloated. "And almost a gallon of sweet preserves," Mary added. 5 bushels of potatoes," said Laura, rubbing her hands on her apron because they remembered the horrid dusty feeling. "And turnips, lots of turnips," Carrie cried. Carrie loved to eat a raw turnip. Pa laughed. "When I get those beans threshed and winnowed and sacked, there'll be plenty near a bushel of beans. When I get those few hills of corn cut, husked, and stored down cellar in a teacup, we'll have quite a harvest." Laura knew that it was a very small harvest, but the hay and the corn would winter the horses and the cow through till spring, and with 5 bushels of potatoes and nearly a bushel of beans and Pa's hunting, they could all live. "I must cut that corn tomorrow," Pa said. "I see no special rush, Charles," Ma remarked. "The rain is over, and I never saw nicer fall weather." "Well, that's so," Paul admitted. I don't know why I want to say Paul, it's Pa. Pa admitted. The nights were cool now, and the early mornings were crisp, but the days were sunny warm. "We could do with some fresh meat for a change," Ma suggested. "Soon as I get the corn in, I'll go hunting," said Pa. Next day he cut and shocked the sod corn. The 10 shocks stood like a row of little Indian teepees by the haystacks. When he had finished them, Pa brought 6 yellow gold pumpkins from the field. "The vines couldn't do much on tough sod," he made an excuse, "and the frost caught the green ones, but we'll get lots of seeds out of these for next year." "Why such a hurry to get the pumpkins in?" Ma asked. "I feel in a hurry, as if there was need to hurry," Pa tried to explain. "You need to get a good night's sleep," said Ma. A misty, fine rain was falling next morning. After Pa had done the chores and eaten breakfast, he put on his coat and the wide-brimmed hat that sheltered the back of his neck. "I'll get us a brace of geese," he said. "I heard them flying over in the night. There will be some in the slough." He took down his shotgun, and sheltering it under his coat, he went out into the weather. After he had gone, Ma said, "Girls, I thought of a surprise for Pa." Laura and Carrie turned round from the dishpan, and Mary straightened up from the bed she was making. "What?" they all asked her. "Hurry and get the work done," said Ma. "And then, Laura, you go to the corn patch and bring me a green pumpkin. I'm going to make a pie." "A pie? But how?" Mary said, and Laura said, "A green pumpkin pie? I've never heard of such a thing, Ma." "Neither did I," said Ma, "but we wouldn't do much if we didn't do things that nobody ever heard of before." Oh my goodness, I can imagine the tummy ache. Laura and Carrie did the dishes properly, but in a hurry. Then Laura ran through the cool, misty rain to the corn patch and lugged back the biggest green pumpkin. "Stand by the oven door and dry yourself," said Ma. "You're not very big, Laura, but you're old enough to put on a shawl without being told." "Hello, Tiny Tim. Welcome back." "I went so fast I dodged between the raindrops," Laura said. "I'm not much wet, Ma, honestly. Now, what do I do?" "You may cut the pumpkin in slices and peel them while I make the pie crust," said Ma. "Then we'll see what we'll see." Ma put the crust in the pie pan and covered the bottom with brown sugar and spices. Then she filled the crust with thin slices of the green pumpkin. She poured half a cup of vinegar over them, put a small piece of butter on top, and laid the top crust over all. "There," she said, when she had finished crimping the edges. "I didn't know you could," Carrie breathed, looking wide-eyed at the pie. "Well, I don't know yet," said Ma. She slipped the pie into the oven and shut the door on it. "But the only way to find out is to try. By dinner time we'll know." They all sat waiting in the tiny shanty. Mary was busily knitting to finish warm stockings for Carrie before cold weather. Laura was sewing 2 long breadths of muslin together to make a sheet. She pinned the edges together carefully and fastened them with a pin to her dress at the knee. Carefully, holding the edges even, she whipped them together with even, tiny stitches. The stitches must be close and small and firm, and they must be deep enough, but not too deep, for the sheet must lie smooth, with not the tiniest ridge down its middle. And all the stitches must be so exactly alike that you could not tell them apart, because that was the way to sew. Mary had liked such work, but now she was blind and could not do it. Sewing made Laura feel like flying to pieces. She wanted to scream. The back of her neck ached, and the thread twisted and knotted. She had to pick out almost as many stitches as she put in. "Blankets are wide enough to cover a bed," she said fretfully. "Why can't sheets be made wide enough?" "Because sheets are muslin," said Mary, "and muslin isn't wide enough for a sheet." The eye of Laura's needle slipped through a tiny hole in her thimble and ran into her finger. She shut her mouth hard and did not say a word. But the pie was baking beautifully. When Ma laid down the shirt that she was making for Pa and opened the oven, the rich smell of baking pie came out. Carrie and Grace stopped to look in while Ma turned the pie so that it would brown evenly. "It's doing nicely," said Ma. "Oh, won't Pa be surprised?" Carrie cried. Just before dinner time, Ma took the pie from the oven. It was a beautiful pie. They kept dinner waiting until almost 1 o'clock, but Pa did not come. Now, keep in mind, dinner is actually the lunchtime meal. I know in some places dinner is actually the evening meal, but in the Midwest, dinner is the afternoon meal. We've discussed that before on our channel. They kept dinner waiting till almost 1 o'clock, but Pa did not come. When he was hunting, he paid no attention to meal times. So at last they ate dinner. The pie must wait until supper time, when Pa would come with fat geese to roast for tomorrow. All afternoon the slow rain fell steadily. When Laura went to the well for water, the sky was low and gray. Far over the prairie, The brown grasses were sodden with rain, and the tall sloth grass stood dripping, bent a little under the steady pressure of the falling rain. Laura hurried back from the well. She did not like to look at the outdoors when all the grass was weeping. Pa did not come home until supper time. He came empty-handed, except for his gun. He did not speak or smile, and his eyes were wide open and still. "What is wrong, Charles?" Ma asked quickly. He took off his wet coat and his dripping hat and hung them up before he answered. "That is what I'd like to know. Something's queer. Not a goose nor a duck on the lake. None in the slough. Not one in sight. They're flying high above the clouds, flying fast. I could hear them calling, Carolyn. Every kind of bird is going south as fast and as high as it can fly. All of them going south. And no other kind of game is out. Every living thing that runs or swims is hidden away somewhere. I never saw country so empty and still." "Never mind," Ma said cheerfully. "Supper's ready. You sit close by the fire, Charles, and dry yourself. I'll move the table up. Seems to me it's growing chilly." It was growing chilly. The cold crept under the table, crawling up from Laura's bare feet to her bare knees under her skirts. But supper was warm and good, and in the lamplight all the faces were shining with the secret of the surprise for Pa. Pa did not notice them. He ate hungrily, but he did not notice what he ate. He said again, "It's queer. Not a duck nor a goose coming down to rest." "Likely the poor things want to get to sunshine," Ma said. "I'm glad we're snug out of the rain under this good roof." Pa pushed back his empty plate, and Ma gave Laura a look that said, "Now." Smiles spread all over their faces, all but Pa's. Carrie wriggled in her chair, and Grace bounced on Ma's lap while Laura set down the pie. For an instant, Pa did not see it. Then he said, "Pie!" His surprise was even greater than they had expected. Carrie and Grace and even Laura laughed out loud. "Caroline, however did you manage to make a pie?" Pa exclaimed. "What kind of pie is it?" "Taste it and see," said Ma. She cut a piece and put it on his plate. Pa cut off the point with his fork and put it in his mouth. "Apple pie! Where in the world did you get apples?" Carrie could keep still no longer. She almost shouted, "It's pumpkin! Mom made it of green pumpkin." Pa took another small bite and tasted it carefully. "I'd never have guessed it," he said. "Ma always could beat the nation cooking." Ma said nothing, but a little flush came up in her cheeks, and her eyes kept on smiling while they all ate that delicious pie. They ate slowly, taking small bites of the sweet spiciness to make it last as long as they could. "Now I want a piece of apple pie." That was such a happy supper that Laura wanted it never to end. When she was in bed with Mary and Carrie, she stayed awake to keep on being happy. She was so sleepily comfortable and cozy. The rain on the roof was a pleasant sound. A splash of water on her face dimly surprised her. She was sure it could not be rain, for the roof was overhead. She snuggled closer to Mary, and everything slid away into dark, warm sleep. Welcome back, Milk Duds. So that was chapter 3. I have to tell you that when I first started my YouTube channel, one of the first videos that I did was I have a collection of old cookbooks, and in one of the old cookbooks from a little town where I grew up, there was a recipe for vinegar pie. And I thought, that sounds absolutely atrocious, but we're going to try it. And then I found out that vinegar pie was actually one of Charles Ingalls' favorite pies that he would ask Ma to make for him from time to time. It was also the favorite pie of our 11th president. I just went to his house too. Why did it is James Polk? James Polk, it was his favorite. And I loved that I could go to James Polk's home. I gotta tuck this hair behind my ear. It's bugging me. And I was talking to the historians at the home there of James Polk. And I asked them, I said, did you know what favorite pie? What's his favorite pie? And they were like, no, we don't know what his favorite pie is. But do you know what Dolly Madison's favorite ice cream was? And Dolly Madison was the wife of President James Madison. They were all friends. They would have dinner parties together. I said, no, I don't know. What is the favorite ice cream of Dolly Madison? Oyster ice cream. Oyster ice cream probably sounds as appealing as vinegar pie does. However, that vinegar pie was delicious. There's a video of me making it. There's a video of Papa Jim eating it, and he ate the entire pie. He came home the next day and he's like, I want a piece of that pie. And we had vinegar pie. My cider is cold. Hello, Blue. Good morning, beautiful. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter because now things are going to get a little dicey. Things are getting colder. Everything's been brought in from the garden. They've harvested as much as they can harvest, and things are getting cold. This is the long winter, and they have a terrible blizzard that comes in, and I'm in the middle of a blizzard right now. So I thought, as long as we have power, we would go ahead and read it. Okay, October blizzard. Yes, go find the video, Milk Dad, and I show you step by step how to make a vinegar pie. This one was really good. You'll have to try it. And the crust that I made for the pie was in another video, and that pie crust recipe was from a little lady that I met when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and she traveled across the country in a covered wagon and settled in their homestead when she was a little girl in a covered wagon. So I thought that was kind of cool. Okay, October blizzard is the name of our next chapter here. Vinegar pie is good. Isn't it good, Tim? Isn't it amazing how you just wouldn't think it would taste good, but it is. It's good. October blizzard. Laura woke up suddenly. She heard singing and a queer slapping sound. Oh, I'm as happy as a big sunflower, slap, slap, that nods and bends in the breezes. Oh, slap, slap. And my heart, slap, is as light, slap, as the wind that blows. Slap, slap. I have no idea how this goes. The leaves from the trees is, oh, slap, slap. I have no idea how to sing that song, but I made it up as I went along. Pa was singing his trouble song and slapping his arms on his chest. I'm going to have to look up and see if I can find a video of the trouble song so I will know how to sing it properly. But sorry for being off key. Laura's nose was cold. Only her nose was outside the quilts that she was huddled under. She put out her whole head, and then she knew why Pa was slapping himself. He was trying to warm his hands. He had kindled the fire. It was roaring in the stove, but the air was freezing cold. Ice crackled on the quilt where the leaking rain had fallen. Winds howled around the shanty and from the roof and all the walls came a sound of scouring. Carrie sleepily asked, "What is it?" "It's a blizzard," Laura told her. "You and Mary stay under the covers." Careful not to let the cold get under the quilts, she crawled out of the warm bed. Her teeth chattered while she pulled on her clothes. Ma was dressing too, beyond the curtain, but they were both too cold to say anything. I got a tickle. Sorry. Okay. The other day when the wind chill factor was like 39 below zero, we lost power here in the house, and this house got so cold so fast. And I told Papa Jim, I said, my elbows are cold. He's still teasing me about that. That was last year. It was cold. And I kept telling my elbows are cold. So he teases me. Okay. Ma and Laura met at the stove where the fire was blazing furiously without warming the air at all. The window was a white blur of madly swirling snow. Snow had blown under the door and across the floor, and every nail in the walls was white with frost. Pa had gone to the stable. Laura was glad that they had so many haystacks in a row between the stable and the shanty. Going from haystack to haystack, Pa would not get lost. A blizzard, Ma chattered. In October, I never heard of. She put more wood in the stove and broke the ice in the water pail to fill the tea kettle. The water pail was less than half full. They must be sparing of water, for nobody could get to the well in that storm. But the snow on the floor was clean. Laura scooped it into the wash basin and set it on the stove to melt for washing in. The air by the stove was not so cold now, so she rolled Grace in quilts and brought her to the stove to dress her. Mary and Carrie shiveringly dressed themselves close to the open oven. They all put on their stockings and shoes. I don't know about you, but I'd rather just stay in my woolly nightgown. I wish I was in my woolly nightgown right now. Breakfast was waiting when Pa came back. He blew in with a howl of wind and swirling snow. Well, those muskrats knew what was coming, didn't they, Laura? He said as soon as he was warm enough to speak. And the geese, too. No wonder they wouldn't stop at the lake, said Ma. The lake's frozen by now, Pa said. Temperature's down near 0 and going lower. I got a tickle on my nose. Pardon me. I don't know how people do this and then they don't get to scratch and tickles. Okay. The temperature's down near 0 and going lower, Pa said. He glanced at the wood box as he spoke. Laura had filled it last night, but already the wood was low. So as soon as he had eaten breakfast, Pa wrapped himself well and brought big armfuls from the wood pile. The shanty was growing colder. The stove could not warm the air inside the thin walls. There was nothing to do but sit huddled in coats and shawls close to the stove. I'm glad I put beans to soak last night, said Ma. She lifted the lid of the bubbling kettle and quickly popped in a spoonful of baking soda. The boiling beans roared, foaming up, but did not quite run over. There's a little bit of salt pork to put in them too, Ma said. Now and then she spooned up a few beans and blew on them. When their skins split and curled, she drained the soda water from the kettle and filled it again with hot water. She put in the bit of pork fat. There's nothing like good hot bean soup on a cold day, said Pa. He looked down at Grace, pulling at his hand. Well, Blue Eyes, what do you want? A Tory, Grace said. Tell us the one about Grandpa and the pig on the sled, Carrie begged. So, taking Grace and Carrie on his knees, Pa began again the stories that he used to tell Mary and Laura in the big woods when they were little girls. Ma and Mary knitted busily in quilt-covered rockers drawn close to the oven, and Laura stood wrapped in her shawl between the stove and the wall. The cold crept in from the corners of the shanty, closer and closer to the stove. Icy cold breezes sucked and fluttered the curtains around the beds. The little shanty quivered in the storm, but the steamy smell of boiling beans was good, and it seemed to make the air warmer. At noon, Ma sliced bread and filled bowls with the hot bean broth, and they all ate where they were, close to the stove. Grace, a cup of cambric tea, was given to her by Ma. Cambric tea was hot water and milk with only a taste of tea in it, but little girls felt grown up when their mothers let them drink cambric tea. The hot soup and hot tea warmed them all. They ate the broth from the beans. Then Ma emptied the beans into a milk pan and set the bit of fat pork in the middle. She laced up the top with dribbles of molasses. She set the pan in the oven and shut the oven door. They would have baked beans for supper. Isn't that amazing? She got so many meals out of that. Then Pa had to bring in more wood. They were thankful that the wood pile was close to the back door. Pa staggered in breathless with the first armful. When he could speak, he said, "The wind takes your breath away. If I'd thought of such a storm as this, I'd have filled this shanty with wood yesterday. Now I'm bringing in as much snow as I am wood." That was almost true. Every time Laura opened the door for him, snow swirled in. Snow fell off him, and the wood was covered with snow. It was snow as hard as ice and fine as sand, and opening the door made the shanty so cold that the snow did not melt. "That's enough for now," Pa said. "If he let in any more cold, the wood he brought would not make near enough heat to drive the cold out." "When you get that snow swept up, Laura, bring me my fiddle," he said. "As soon as I can thaw out my fingers, we'll have a tune to drown out the yowl of that wind." In a little while he was able to tune the strings and rosin the bow. Then he set the fiddle to his shoulder and he sang with it. I'm not going to sing this time, don't worry. But here's the song. "Oh, if I were young again, I'd lead a different life. Lay up some money and buy some land and take Dinah for my wife. But now I'm getting old and gray. I cannot work any more. Oh, carry me back, oh, carry me back to the old Virginia shore. So carry me long and carry me long and carry me till I die." "For pity's sake," Ma broke in, "I'd as soon listen to the wind." She was trying to keep Grace warm, and Grace was struggling and whimpering. Ma sat her down. "There, run if you're bound to. You'll be glad enough to come back to the stove." "I'll tell you what," Pa exclaimed. "Laura and Carrie, you get out there with Grace, and let's see you quick-step march. It'll warm up your blood." It was hard to leave the shelter of their huddled shawls, but they did as Pa said. Then his strong voice rang out with the singing fiddle. "March, march." More words I don't know how to pronounce. "Why, my lads, dinna ye march forward in order? March, march, all the blue bonnets are over the border. Many a banner spread flutters above your head, many a crest that is famous in story." Round and round they marched, Laura and Carrie and Grace, singing with all their might, thumping loud thumps of their shoes on the floor. "Mount and make ready then, sons of the mountain glen. Fight for your homes and for the Scottish glory." Now, I'm wondering why Pa had Scottish ditties that he was singing. It would be interesting to find out what their lineage was. Where does Ingalls come from? Where does that surname come from? They felt that banners were blowing above them and they were marching to victory. They did not even hear the storm anymore. They were warm to the tips of their toes. Then the music ended and Pa laid his fiddle in its box. "Well, girls, it's up to me to march out against this storm and make the stock comfortable for the night. Blamed at that old tune don't give me the splunk to fighting even as a blizzard." Ma warmed his coat and muffler by the oven while he put away his fiddle box. They all heard the wind howling furiously. "We'll have hot baked beans and hot tea waiting when you get back, Charles," Ma promised him. "And then we'll all go to bed and keep warm, and likely the storm will be over by morning." But in the morning, Pa sang again his sunflower song. The window was the same white blur. The winds still drove the scouring snow against the shivering little shanty. The blizzard lasted 2 more long days and 2 more nights. We've had that here. I've had it where I will go into one of the rooms and there's nothing but white. The windows are completely covered in white from the blowing snow. There's times we've even opened the door and we've got, 2, 3, 4 foot of snow blown up against the door. What do you guys have to say? Thank you for reading to us. It's a true comfort before bedtime. You're welcome, Milk Duds. That was chapter 3 and 4. Do you guys want one more or should we call it a night? Let me know in the comments below. I think I might have it in me as long as I promise not to sing. I might have one more in me. But if you guys want to put it off to another night, you just let me know and we can say goodnight. So let me know. Hit the thumb. make sure you subscribed, and then let me know in the comments below if you'd like another chapter. I do wish my cider was still warm, though. It's cold. And next time, maybe I'll see if I can get my hair done. So this was just, I didn't even plan this. This wasn't even planned. I just decided, oh, let's go up and read. But look, I mean, we're already like that far into our book already. I wish, maybe one more. Okay. One more. Let me show you one more thing, though. Let me stretch. Let me reach. I want to show you before I read the next chapter, and I'm going to do a video on my my gift shop haul from when we went to Little House on the Prairie. Ingalls. Oh, look at, we're learning just like how we learned when we did tea. I love this. Ingalls' surname is an English name with Norse roots, deriving from either of two old Norse personal names, Ingle, Ingelger, or Ingolf. Ingswolf. Ings was an ancient Germanic fertility god. Ooh, well, didn't that come true? Look at all them baby girls they had. I have to show you what I got. So if you've ever watched the series Little House on the Prairie, hands up, who loves Miss Beadle, the teacher, Miss Beadle? She was their real teacher. She's in the books. And then Charlotte Stewart played Eva Beadle on Little House on the Prairie. And I was speaking with some of the historians down at Laura Ingalls Wilder's home down there in Missouri at Rocky Ridge. And I just was going to miss meeting Charlotte Stewart by just a few days. And they said, well, she's going to be here. And they got something for me. Let me show you what they got me. I got a beetle bag. Does anybody know what a beetle bag is? I got a beetle bag. I'm so happy to get a beetle bag. So Charlotte Stewart, who plays Miss Beadle, she makes these little quilted bags, right? And you can take them to the farmer's market or put your things in them that you get at the store, whatever. Look at this. Look. Look who's on the front of my beetle bag. Michael Landon. Paw. Got Paw on the front of my beetle bag. Isn't that so precious? And she made this. Miss Beadle made this. Now, she was supposed to sign it for me. They were supposed to have it personalized for me, but they were so busy and things got out of hand and out of control. And they did not, they were so sad when I finally met up with them. They said, we are so sorry. We didn't get your beetle bag signed. And I said, that's okay. But inside my heart was dying. So I need to see if I can meet up with Charlotte Stewart and get my beetle bag signed. But it's so neat to know that she made this. Miss Beadle made that bag and it's mine. All right, one more chapter, guys. One more, and then we'll call it a night. Let me see what we've got here. Okay. After the Storm is the name of this chapter. I got to hike up my sleeves on this one. Okay. Isn't it neat, Milk Duds? Oh, just love it. Okay. On the fourth morning, there was a queer feeling in Laura's ears. She peeped from the quilts and saw snow drifted over the bed. She heard the little crash of the stove lid and then the first crackling of the fire. Then she knew why her ears felt empty. The noise of the blizzard had stopped. I've got to tell you, growing up, I grew up on a ranch up in the mountains in Southern California, and we had a potbelly stove. That was our only source of heat. And I can remember my dad lighting the fire and my mom always keeping a kettle of water on it to keep the air moist. But it makes me feel like this is how I grew up too. And I would have frost on the inside of the windows when I would wake up in the morning. It was cold. And I'd have to go out and milk the cows and that. But anyways. Wake up, Mary, she sang out, poking Mary with her elbow. The blizzard's over. She jumped out of the warm bed into air colder than ice. The hot stove seemed to give out no heat at all. The pail of snow water was almost solidly frozen. It's as cold as ever outside. Oh, I missed a sentence. Hang on. The water was solidly frozen, but the frosted windows were glowing with sunshine. It's as cold as ever outside, Pa said when he came in. He bent over the stove to thaw the icicles from his mustache. They sizzled on the stove top and went up in steam. Pa wiped his mustache and went on. The winds tore a big piece of tar paper off the roof. Tight as it was nailed on, still ripped it off. No wonder the roof leaked rain and snow. Anyway, it's over, Laura said. It was pleasant to be eating breakfast and to see the yellow glowing window panes. We'll have Indian summer yet, Ma said. She was sure. This storm was so early, it can't be the beginning of winter. I never knew a winter to set in so early, Pa admitted, but I don't like the feel of things. What things, Charles? Ma wanted to know. Pa couldn't say exactly. He said, there's some stray cattle out by the haystacks. Are they tearing down the hay? Ma asked quickly. No, said Pa. Then what of it, if they aren't doing any harm? Ma said. I guess they're tired out by the storm, said Pa. They took shelter there by the haystacks. I thought I'd let them rest and eat a little before I drove them off. I can't afford to let them tear down the stacks, but they could eat a little without doing any harm. But they aren't eating. What's wrong then? Asked Ma. Nothing, Pa said. They're just standing there. That's nothing to upset a body, said Ma. No, Pa said. He drank his tea. Well, I might as well go drive them off. He put on his coat and cap and mittens again and went out. After a moment, Ma said, You might as well go with him, Laura. He may need help to drive some of them away from the hay. Quickly, Laura put Ma's big shawl over her head and pinned it snugly under her chin with the shawl pin. The woolen folds covered her from head to foot. Even her hands were under the shawl. Only her face was out. Outdoors, the sun glitter hurt her eyes. She breathed a deep breath of the tingling cold and squinted her eyes to look around her. The sky was hugely blue, and all the land was blowing white. The straight, strong wind did not lift the snow, but drove it scudding across the prairie. We get that here. We get that blowing snow, and it looks like dry ice. It's very eerie. It just floats across the roads, and it looks like dry ice. It's so eerie looking. The cold stung Laura's cheeks. It burned in her nose, and it tingled in her chest and came out in steam on the air. She held a fold of the shawl across her mouth, and her breath made frost on it. When she passed the corner of the stable, she saw Pa going ahead of her, and she saw the cattle. She stood and stared. The cattle were standing in sunshine and shadow by the haystacks. Red and brown and spotted cattle and one thin black one. They stood perfectly still, every head bowed down to the ground. Their hairy red necks and brown necks all stretched down from the bony, gaunt shoulders to monstrous, swollen white heads. Pa! Laura screamed. Pa motioned her to stay where she was. He went on trudging through the low-flying snow towards those creatures. Do you guys know what's happened? Are you painting the picture in your brain? They did not seem like real cattle. They stood so terribly still. In the whole herd, there was not the least bit of movement. Only their breathing sucked their hairy sides in between the rib bones and pushed them out again. Their hip bones and their shoulder bones stood up sharply. Their legs were braced out, stiff and still. And where their heads should be, swollen white lumps seemed fast to the ground under the blowing snow. On Laura's head, the hair prickled up, and a horror went down her backbone. Tears from the sun and the wind swelled out her staring eyes and ran cold on her cheeks. Pa went on slowly against the wind. He walked up to the herd. Not one of the cattle moved. For a moment, Pa stood looking. Then he stooped and quickly did something. Laura heard a bellow, and a red steer's back humped and jumped. The red steer ran, staggering and bawling. It had an ordinary head with eyes and nose and open mouth, bawling out steam on the wind. Another one bellowed and ran a short, staggering run, and then another. Pa was doing the same thing to them, one by one. Their bawling rose up to the cold sky. At last they all drifted away together. They went silently now in the knee-deep spray of blowing snow. Pa waved to Laura to go back to the shanty while he inspected the haystacks. So let me show you the drawing for this. All of the cattle, their heads were frozen to the ground. That's why they were standing so still. All of this just froze. They were just a big mound of ice and snow. And as they exhaled, it just kind of stuck and they were frozen to the ground. My goodness, how scary. Whatever kept you so long, Laura? Ma asked. Did the cattle get into the haystacks? No, Ma, she answered. I guess their heads were frozen to the ground. That can't be, Ma exclaimed. It must be one of Laura's queer notions, Mary said, busily knitting in her chair by the stove. How could cattle's heads freeze to the ground, Laura? It's really worrying the way you talk sometimes. Well, ask Pa then, Laura said shortly. She was not able to tell Ma and Mary what she felt. She felt that somehow in the wild night and storm, the stillness that was underneath all sounds on the prairie had seized the cattle. When Pa came in, Ma asked him, What was wrong with the cattle, Charles? Their heads were frozen over with ice and snow, Pa said. Their breath froze over their eyes and their noses till they couldn't see nor breathe. I was right. Laura stopped sweeping. Pa, their own breath, smothering them, she said in horror. Pa understood how she felt. He said, They're all right now, Laura. I broke off the ice off of their heads. They're breathing now, and I guess they'll make it to shelter somewhere. Carrie and Mary were wide-eyed, and even Ma looked horrified. She said briskly, Get your sweeping done, Laura. And Charles, for pity's sake, why don't you take off your wraps and warm yourself? I got something to show you, Pa said. He took his hand carefully out of his pocket. Look here, girls. Look at what I found hidden in the haystack. Slowly, he opened his hand. In the hollow of his mitten sat a little bird. He put it gently in Mary's hands. Why, it's standing straight up, Mary exclaimed, touching it lightly with her fingertips. They had never seen a bird like it. It was small, but looked exactly like the picture of the great auk in Pa's green book, The Wonders of the Animal World. It had the same white breast and black back and wings, the same short legs placed far back, and the same large webbed feet. It stood straight up on its short legs, like a tiny man with black coat and trousers and a white shirt front, and its little black wings were like arms. What is it, Pa? Oh, what is it? Carrie cried in delight, and she held Grace's eager hands. Mustn't touch, Grace. I never saw anything like it, said Pa. It must have tired out in the storm winds and dropped down and struck against the haystack. It had crawled into the hay for shelter. It's a great auk, said Laura. She declared it. It's only a little one. It's full grown. It isn't a nestling, said Ma. Look at its feathers. Yes, it's full grown, whatever it is, Pa agreed. Am I sitting out of the thing there? Okay. The little bird stood straight up on Mary's soft palm and looked at them with its bright black eyes. It's never seen humans before, said Pa. How do you know, Pa? Mary asked. Because it isn't afraid of us, Pa said. Oh, can we keep it, Pa? Can we, Ma? Carrie begged. Well, that depends, Pa said. Mary's fingertips touched the little bird all over, while Laura told her how white its smooth breast was and how very black its back and tail and little wings were. Then they let Grace carefully touch it. The little auk sat still and looked at them. They set it on the floor, and it walked a little way. Then it pushed its webbed feet tiptoe against the boards and flapped its wings a little. It can't get going, said Pa. It's a water bird. It must start from the water where it can use those webbed feet to get it up to speed. Finally, they put it in a box in the corner. It stood there looking up at them with its round, bright black eyes, and they wondered what it ate. That was a queer storm all around, said Pa. I don't like it. Why, Charles, it was only a blizzard, Ma said. We'll likely have a nice warm weather now. It's beginning to warm up a little already. Mary took up her knitting needles again, and Laura went on sweeping. Pa stood by the window, and after a while Carrie led Grace away from the little auk that they looked out to. Oh, look, jackrabbits! Carrie exclaimed. All around the stable, dozens of jackrabbits were hopping. The rascals have been living in our hay all through the storm, Pa said. I ought to take my pew-pew and get us a rabbit stew. I have to be careful what I say so I don't get in trouble. But he had been standing at the window looking at them without making a move towards his pew-pew. Please let them go, Pa, this one time, Laura pleaded. When they came because they had to find shelter. Pa looked at Ma, and Ma smiled. We aren't hungry, Charles, and I'm thankful we all got through that storm. Well, I guess I can spare the jackrabbits a little hay, said Pa. He took the winter pail and went to the well. The air that came in when he opened the door was very cold, but the sun was already beginning to melt the snow on the south side of the shanty. And that's the end of that chapter. I'm going to put a little piece of yarn here to mark my place so I don't lose it. So when I get the chance to come up and we'll pick back up where we left off. Oh, let's see. You know what I really liked? I really liked that Laura's such an empath. I mean, yeah, they probably really could have used that meat, but she knew those little rabbits came to them for shelter, and it would be horrible to take them out at a time like that. But I'm really enjoying this little book. I'm really enjoying it. It gives you just a different perspective as opposed to watching the show. And I've read them before when I was little, but I've never read them as a full-grown adult. I think you have a different look on it, especially living here in the Midwest. Did you know that the Ingalls lived in Iowa for a short time? They lived in Wisconsin. They lived in Minnesota. They lived in Iowa. They've lived in Kansas, but they spent most of their life in De Smet, North Dakota. And then North Dakota or South Dakota? I think it's South Dakota. Dakota Territory. It wasn't even north and south when they lived there. And then Laura and her husband and their baby girl moved down to Missouri. And that's where she spent the last of her life. And I really enjoyed visiting there. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining me tonight. I still hear the wind blowing. I don't think it's as bad as it was earlier. And I don't hear the ice hitting the windows, but I'm sure we're going to get plenty of ice overnight. So I think I'm going to wrap things up here, get into my nice warm jammies, stow my bonnet away until next time we come together. And I'll see how tomorrow night or the next night is looking. We'll see if we can put something together. If you see that I'm on, join me, and I'll read even if you don't show up. But hopefully you'll get to join me for some more reading of this wonderful book, because this winter that they're going to have is going to get bad. It's going to get very bad. It's going to be the long winter, and they have a lot of hardship ahead of them. And I think you'll be amazed to see who steps in and really helps them. So good night, everybody. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on the way out. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Have a blessed evening, and I hope to see you sometime soon. Bye, guys.